Here's the Mindful Man reading more chapters from Flanders Friend, which is on Amazon KDP. Chapter 19, Home. Tim left Arthur feeling more confident and happy for a change. When he got home, his mum fussed and dabbed at his eye, and he just laughed and told her not to worry. It won't happen again, he said, and she looked puzzled but relieved. And Tim slept well that night. He was so happy that Arthur was back in his life, and he knew that Arthur felt the same. But he still missed his dad, and every now and again his dad's face would appear in his dreams. It was a comfort to him, and he knew that he had to keep going. What choice did he have? The next day, before he set off to school, he decided to visit Arthur. He was covered in shaving foam. It was obvious that he had just woken up, and Timothy watched him shave. It was fascinating. He'd never seen anyone shave before, as he was too young to shave himself. He was glad, as it looked messy and dangerous. He knew they didn't have time to practice boxing, as he didn't want to be late for school again. We'll practice later, said Arthur, shouting after him, as he wiped the foam from his chin. Tim approached the school gates, but this time he wasn't worried. He wasn't surprised to see Smigger there, but this time he held his head up high. I enjoy spending your money, said Smigger with a sneer. Do you have any more? No, said Tim sharply, and if I had, you wouldn't get any. Are you sure of that? Said Smigger, moving closer to him and narrowing his eyes. Tim looked him straight in the eye, and then he just brushed past him. Tim was shaking inside, but outwardly he appeared as calm as a dove, and with each step he wondered if Smigger would jump on him or roughly grab him by the shoulders. Unknown to him, Smigger was slightly taken aback, and before he knew it, Tim had disappeared into the throng of school children to safety. He told Arthur what had happened, and Arthur roared with laughter. He was proud of him. Now we have to practice more, he said, for as sure as frogs are frogs, he'll be back, he said wisely. So once again, Tim pulled on the heavy gloves, and as soon as he did, he felt a foot taller, and it felt to him as if he had a magical ring of steel around him for protection. I feel good, he told Arthur. That's called confidence, said Arthur, nodding. Now try to hit me on the nose. The nose, said Tim, amazed. Isn't that going to hurt? He said. Only if you hit me, said Arthur. Tim lifted up his hand and he threw out his right arm, and it sped towards Arthur's red, crumpled nose. Tim was worried that he might injure him, but he had nothing to worry about as Arthur sidestepped away with the deftness of a ballet dancer. Good shot, he said. Now try again. Time after time, Tim swung out, only to hit dead air. His arm was starting to ache, and he was beginning to get annoyed. He felt guilty being annoyed by Arthur, after all he had done for him. Maybe boxing turns people into monsters, he thought. That was the last thing he wanted to be. Come on, hit me, shouted Arthur. He's gone mad, thought Tim, but he was so tired out from all of the swinging that he gave one final big effort. Then boom, he felt the pointy smudge of Arthur's nose, and he stepped back, but not far enough. Arthur shook his head as his nose became redder. I'm sorry, said Tim, feeling guilty. Don't be sorry, said Arthur. That was fantastic, he said. Just you wait until Smigger feels the sting of your punch. Tim smiled. He wasn't sure if he had it in him yet, but at least he knew that he had a good punch left in him. It was like wearing a suit of armor. That's enough for today, said Arthur, and he sat down tired on a log and rubbed his nose. What shall we do now? Said Tim. Give me a minute and I'll see what other goodies I have in me tent, said Arthur mysteriously. He'd been gone for a few minutes when he came out looking uncharacteristically sheepish, and he looked round the fields to see if anyone else was around, and then he reached into his pocket. Tim wondered what he was going to show him and why he was making such a big thing of it. Then he knew why. In his hand was an old-looking pistol. It was a Luger, and Tim was amazed and a little worried. Arthur sensed this. Don't worry, he said. I won't be using it. Where'd you get it? Tim said, astonished. That's a secret, said Arthur, and he lifted it up to the sky. Then he pointed at a swallow, which was swirling across the icy blue sky. Arthur cocked the pistol, and Tim wanted to cry out, but he was transfixed. Arthur squeezed the trigger slowly. Tim's heart felt like it was going to explode. Click. There was no bang. I'm sorry, son. I was just practicing, said Arthur. You scared me and that bird to death, Tim said. He was slightly annoyed. Don't worry, said Arthur. I'd never kill a bird. People maybe, but never birds. Tim wasn't sure if Arthur was joking or not, and he didn't want to test him again, even with an unloaded gun in his hand. I keep it for me protection, said Arthur with a big grin. Just in case I have burglars in me tent, he added. Tim laughed. He'd never heard of people burgling tents before. But then he thought about it. Why wouldn't they?